Namaste. We'll move on to the next session. Dr. Prathosh received his PhD from IASC Bengaluru in 2015 in the area of temporal data analysis. He worked in corporate research labs including Xerox Research India, Philips Research and US companies also. His work in the industry focusing on healthcare analytics led to the generation of several IPs actually, patents, IPs, etc. So he has a very deep background in modern technical areas, but I would also like to emphasize his traditional adhyayanam. He has been a student of Nyaya-shastra and Vedanta-shastra for more than 2 decades now. Not just a student, but he also teaches these shastras to students. He has in fact studied them in a traditional Gurukula system. There is a Maharaja Pathashala in Mysuru. He has been there. And he also has done Veda Adhyayanam. Today, he'll be talking on the rigor of Shastric methodology. So the methods in the Shastra is something that has gained importance. In fact, how do we look at Upapattis, etc. in Ganita Shastram also, it has become important. So in this, what is something unique about Shastric way of understanding things? And why should the current Bharatiya generation study the Shastra?
Namaskarbhyah. Atra Sveshu Shastreshu Krita Bhuri Parishamaha Bahavaha Vidvamsaha Santi Te Sarvepi Matsakashat Jnanepi Vruddhaha Vayasyapi Vruddhaha Tesham Madhye Sthitva Madiyam Vyakhyanam Kinchit Kartavyam Iti Mama Bhagyasthanam Manye Bharatiya Shastra Vishayeshu चर्चा भवति अत्र सा तु चर्चा म्लेच्छभाषायां भवति इति आश्चर्यमिदम्. I'll switch to English now. That shows what state we are in. We are talking about Indian knowledge systems, not Bharatiya Vidya Sthana-s or Bharatiya Vidya Sthana-ni. Kim sanjatam? Bharate sthitva Bharata Shastra adhyatॄणां विदुषां मध्ये स्थित्वा म्लेच्छभाषायां भारतीयशास्त्रविषयम् अधिकृत्य चर्चा सम्भवति इति एतद् महद् आश्चर्यं खलु. कथम् एषा इयं स्थितिः सञ्जाता इति अस्माभिः चिन्तितव्यं भवति. Why did we land here in the first place? Why is that we are speaking in English and we are all comfortable speaking in English but not speaking in Sanskritam? What happened? When I studied Shastras, it was mostly because my mother, parents asked me to do it. Bhagavataha Krupapatraha aham iti manye. Yata my parents put me in studying Shastras very early in my life. But as I started studying more and more Shastras, it became inevitable that I cannot stay away from Shastras. So once you become a Vidyarthi of Bharatiya Shastras, you are always a Vidyarthi of Bharatiya Shastra no matter what you do. And today I teach Bharatiya Shastras to a lot of my students even in places like IITs and so on. Topic that I was asked to present today was what is that which is there in Bharatiya Shastras that makes it so unique, and why should today's generations be even exposed to Shastras? If you have a seminar on Bharatiya Vidya Sthana-s, you only see a handful of people. If you have a seminar on artificial intelligence, I can guarantee you that there are 1,000 people that are here. My colleagues, Professor Sandeep is sitting here, he knows what I am talking about. Now why? We have to ask ourselves hard questions, that have we become redundant? Has our Shastras become museum pieces where it has relevance, so only so much that it was studied sometime in the history, and sometime in the history we were the pioneers of science and engineering, which is also a fact. Now is that all it is to it? Is it that our Shastras has only anthropologic value? Right? That is that you only study it as a museum piece. Right? That okay, it was done very nice. Okay, these were people who did great things. But today, come on, we are using video cameras. I am talking in front of a mic. Everybody has a 5G mobile phone in their hands and so on. Where is Bharatiyata here? This is, in Shastras there is something called Svavachana Svanyaya Svakriya Virodha iti. See, contradictions are of three types. Virodha-s trividaha. Svavachana svanyaya svakriya virodha bhedena. So svavachana virodha, an example that is given is that you say me mata vandhya, right, and you just say that my mother doesn't have children, right. Svakriya virodha is where you say that aham mukaha, you just say that I am dumb, you say that I am dumb, right, you are saying it. So that is svavachana virodha. So svakriya virodha. Swanyaya virodha is that you say something and do something else. So these are the fundamental three virodhas that have been said in all shastras. Now aren't we all doing svavachana swanyaya svakriya virodha? So the question is, where is the reconciliation? Now why do you think the brightest of the bright in this country are choosing a computer science undergraduation degree but not studying Nyaya-shastra? Asmakam doshah kutra. So have we failed as people who are guardians of Bharatiya Shastras? Or is it really that the Shastras only have, I mean, it's like art, right? I mean, the art form is not for everybody. Whoever is interested, they'll study art. Whoever is interested, they'll study history. Is it what it is? I mean, honestly speaking, today making a profession out of an art form is very, very difficult. All of us know this. You can at best be passionate towards an art form and learn it because you are passionate towards an art form, right? So now Shastras have sort of resorted to that situation where you study Shastras because whatever, right? I mean, you are forced or like you have some shraddha towards it, but it has no relevance today, is the kind of narrative that has been set by people who have not studied Shastras. So there are two kinds of people that are there in this world. Dvidha purushaha. Purushaha meaning not purushaha, striyopi, dvidhaha. The ones who have studied Shastras, right, and not knowing what is happening in the contemporary world, they cannot do anything about it because they don't know how to put forth the relevance. And there are other kinds of people who have studied the modern science or whatever and does not know what is there in Shastras. So there is no bridge that is being connected. But the question is there a bridge that is even needed? Is the big question. What is happening in the name of like Indian, you have that, right? I mean, itite samshayo ma bhut raja kalasya karanam iti. Idanintanasya rajnyaha asmin vishaye shraddha vartate iti krutva. We are even having this discussion today and so on, right? Raja kalasya karanam. Now, even there, I see a dosha that we are only saying stories like, ha, hamara, or I mean, we had this thing in our granthas 500 years before. It's okay. I mean, the world has moved on. Come on. The reality is that semiconductors did not originate from India, right? Algorithms on artificial intelligence did not originate from India, right? And the communication technology did not come from India, and so on. Now there is a Svavachana Swanyaya Svakriya Virodha that I see here. While you say that you want to be a capitalist country where you are talking about GDP as a metric of success, and you are talking about Bharatiya Shastras, where is the correlation here? See, these are real questions that we need to ask and try to answer. Unless we do that and try and put in a framework into how do we fit in Shastras into the contemporary world, we will be not attracting the best talent into Shastras, and that is not happening. And that is what is happening. Tattu pratyaksha vishayam idanim. That you are not seeing the best of the best minds entering into Shastras, and there is a reason for it. So I have been very honestly asking this question to myself, that where do I place Shastras in today's world, and how do I convince, let alone others, how do I convince my own children to pursue Shastras in their lives? Given a chance, I have seen a lot of Shastra Vidwansaha tatra tatra vartamanaha. Tesham putro va putri va Shastradhyayanam na kurvanti. They will go to engineering colleges and medical colleges. This is a reason for it. I have been asking this question for a long time. So now let's try to, at least I am not here to give a lecture, because as I said, atra sarvepi jnana vruddha avyo vruddha eva santi. I will just try to sort of share some of the thoughts that I had, and also want to have an open discussion with you maybe after this session, that what is your opinion on that, and I have been contemplating a lot about this. Okay. So now there is one narrative that people say, that whatever today's science is, you can find it in our Shastras. that has been a fashionable thing these days. Right? Oh, quantum theory, Veda mein tha, right? I mean, oh, artificial intelligence yahan pe tha, all that. So, I mean, it's an expression in English, for God's sake, we should stop doing it. I tell you what happens, we will be ridiculed. Serious scientists ridiculous, because it's, come on, I mean, if there were quantum physics in your Vedas, then just show the world that you are only retrospectively trying to force fit something into whatever is there. Now, nothing happened from here. We should stop doing it. We should start looking at the contemporary science in Shastric texts. We should try to stop doing it, and that narrative has to stop at least at the level where people like us who has a lot of shraddha towards Bharatiya Shastras should not do that. So now anything that you see in Bharatiya Shastras that has some relevance to modern day science is only incidental in my opinion. Every Shastra starts with something called Anubandha Chatushtaya. Everybody has studied Shastras knows that you have Vishaya Prayojana Adhikari and Sambandha, right? They set what is the subject of the Shastra, what is the Prayojana objective of the Shastra, who is the Adhikari here, and what is the Sambandha. If you look at any Shastra, Bharatiya Shastras, right, barring a very few, they won't talk about the Vaishayika Sukha or Prakritika Sukha as their objective or Vishaya. So there is no way that you are finding electricity or quantum physics or AI in Bharatiya Shastras, and I think we should stop doing it. Having said that, you can always have your eye open to sort of see if there are some ideas that come out of these kinds of Shastras, and some do. Very, very interestingly, I was talking to Sandeep the other day that, see, today's AI, I don't know how many of you are exposed to AI, but that's our day in and day out activity. See, 2018-19, after 2018-19, there was an inflection point that came in artificial intelligence, where you see all these language models today, right? Large language models, ChatGPT, etc. Right? What changed significantly was a few algorithms that came up in the time of 2017-18. One of them was what is called as the attention mechanism. Okay, it might get a little technical, but I will just tell you, for the sake of completeness. So now attention mechanism is one algorithm that came up, which actually made, which is the workhorse of all of these language models that you see today. Interestingly, I found out that there is a one-to-one connection between the Anvitabhidhanavada that is said in the Purvamamsa and the Vedantis and the attention mechanism that is there. So padarthanam yogyetara anvita swartheshu shaktihi iti anvitabhidhanavadam. So basically the idea is, when you want to extract some meaning, right, from a given phrase, you look at the constituent words. Right? The idea is, every word does not convey a meaning in isolation. I am watering it down too much, but the idea is that every word does not convey its meaning in isolation, but sarvesham padanam yogya itara anvita swartheshu shaktihi iti nyayah. So what does that mean is that the stock example that is given is, if you say that you just bring the microphone here, the word microphone does not point out to this standalone object microphone, but it always points out to an object that is connected to microphone, which means that the microphone is connected to something. The disconnected word objects does not exist is what Anvitabhidhanavada says. Very, very, this is Staulyena Uchyate Maya. Now, this is exactly what is there in the attention mechanism, where the idea is that you don't look at one token or a word in isolation, but every word, right, or every token attends to all other tokens, and you compute what is the amount of attention that is there with each of the word. That is exactly what is Anvitabhidhanavada says, that padanam yogyetara anviteshu swartheshu shaktihi, whenever they get prayukta in a vakya, the visheshanvaya gets ascribed to it. So that is, in my mind, it is like calculating the amount of attention that is there amongst each of the tokens that are given, right, in a particular sentence, and this algorithm changed the way the AI is being looked at. Now, as I said, this is only incidental. So now you might ask the question, right, I mean, if you knew Anvitabhidhanavada, then why didn't you come up with the attention mechanism, right? But see, the thing is, the point that I wanted to make is, this is not the moola uddesha of Shastra. This is not the Anvitabhidhanavada, or rather, looking at the attention mechanism is not what the Shastras are meant for. So don't start looking at it. You will find a lot of incidental correlations between the modern day science and the Shastras. Just see them as incidental coincidences that are there. Okay, it's a they call it, no, it's like, brownie points or feel good feeling moments. It's there. Okay, they have thought about it. Okay, so now let's come back to our fundamental question, that why should one look at Shastras, right? Okay, so I have multiple viewpoints around this. Why would see? Okay, let me make my pratignya. So whenever you talk of Shastras, right, there is a pratignya vakya that is there, and then you talk of hetus for all that. I am pretty much convinced that Bharatiya Shastra Adhyanam is a non-negotiable thing for anybody who wants to become a student of science. Right. That is something I am more or less convinced now, that it is. I had my doubts that okay, Shastras are needed or not. Now I think the good exposure to Bharatiya Shastras is sort of non-negotiable for anybody who is pursuing science. So this is my pratignya. Now I have to give hetus for it. How do I justify this pratignya? You can say that, oh, there are so many people in the world who are pursuing science that have no exposure whatsoever to Bharatiya Shastras, right? How is this possible? I will make another pratignya now. The so called modern scientific methods that you see today are nothing but the Bharatiya Vidya Sthana-s Epistemology. Now my hypothesis is that anybody who is a student of Shastras, right, is by construction scientific, according to the modern definition of science. Now what has happened is that because of whatever historical reasons or the kind of schooling systems that we have today, our students or younger generation is made non-Bharatiyas or made non-scientific deliberately. Now whoever becomes a good student of science, no matter where, is a Bharatiya Shastra Vetra, in my opinion. So now you know it by the you using Shastras as a tool, iti kartavyata bhinna, that's all, right? I mean, you can have the Bharatiya tools or some other tool, right, tooling of science, but the idea of scientific thinking, what do you call as scientific thinking, is the fundamental bedrock of Bharatiya Shastras. Now let me give you some pointers and examples of why do I think so. Okay, so now if you look at any Bharatiya Vidya Sthana, right, what does it start with? Everything has a sutra prasthana to it, right? So you have the Vyakarana Sutras, you have the Nyaya-shastra, you have Vedanta Sutras and all that. In majority of the sutras, how does the first sutra look like? The first sutra always have the jignasa pada, right? You have athato dharma jignasa, athato brahma jignasa, right? And there is this jignasa pada. Jignasa shabdasya vicharesh lakshana ityuchyate shastreshu. So it starts with enquiry. You look at how Shastras are constructed. They start with enquiry. Now, anybody who has this methodology of starting anything with a solid enquiry backed with an epistemological system is Bharatiya. What is actually happening is we are making people non-Bharatiya by stopping them inquire. Now, if somebody studies Shastras, right? And by the way, I should tell you one other thing, right? I mean, all of you have been studying Shastras. The Pramana-Vyavastha that is there in Bharatiya Shastras is no different than the Galileo methods of science, right? I mean, you have Pratyakshanumana and Agama, right? Agama is not something that is too much taken into consideration in the Western way of doing things, but it's okay. But the Pratyakshanumana way of doing it is very much Bharatiya. If you look at Nyaya-shastra, right? So we have this long Parishkaras that are there for Vyapti Lakshana and all that. So they are nothing but inductive way of proving things, right? So now I am of the opinion that you don't have to study Nyaya-shastras, but you need to study rigorous mathematics. In today's scientific world, now we have physicists here, we have astronomers here and all that. If you want to be relevant in today's world, today's scientific world, there is no other way than studying mathematics. Now to me, studying Nyaya-shastra is no different than studying mathematics, just that the terminologies are different. Now what do you have to look for when you are studying a Shastra is the samskara that this Shastra imbibes on one's mind. The problem is people in this country do not study mathematics, neither study mathematics rigorously nor study Nyaya-shastra rigorously. So that I think is the real problem, right? So now, as I said, if I tell you that anybody who would who should be a student of science has to study mathematics, you would say yes, oh no problem, everybody knows that. Now if I say that everybody who wants to be doing rigorous science has to study Nyaya-shastra, then oh, what is this Nyaya-shastra, why should one study Nyaya? This is the thing that is there. So now think about it. All our children after coming out of school, right, have stopped thinking critically. Now if you are a student of Shastras, then you cannot stop thinking critically, because in Vyakarana, right, yathottara muninam pramanyam. So basically there is one muni, the second muni comes, the third muni comes, you know, you have the pramanya, right, that gets reconciled after the next seer comes up. Okay. Now when did we stop this? The question that I was asking in the beginning stage of the talk is that we have created a system where people are made non-Bharatiyas by construction, right. I see my own children going to schools and they come out being more Western, or rather, you know, more non-Bharatiya, rather I would say, that because they have been told not to do vichara, they have been told not to do jignasa. Okay. So all the epistemological methods that are constructed in Shastras, where do we teach them that? So where do we tell them, you know, I keep quoting this many times. If you look at any Shastra, so how does it happen? It's a conversation. Look at the Upanishadic text. So a Shishya comes to a Guru, right, he would say, teach me something, you know, I have a question. Now this Guru in a lot of occasions says that, oh, this is such a great question, you know, every conversation starts from saying sadhu prishtam mahabhaga. Have you seen any instance in our Shastras where people are being discouraged for asking questions? So there are things like, oh, this question, this was such an important question that this is going to help the generations to come, and having said all that, the Guru says that I too do not know the answer to that question, let us go and inquire the other person, right, and see, you know, we will go to another Jnani to inquire about this. Now this is Bharatiya Shastra. You will be surprised to know that there is one of the works of one of the philosophers, Sri Madhvacharya, who has commented on Rigveda. Very interesting observation he makes, that we think that, you know, the idea of peer reviewing, right, you know, only originated from West. It's a very nice thing that he says that we in our tradition, what do we say is that every rishi has a mantra darshana, right, you know, he is doing something and a mantra gets drishta by a rishi. Now he says that not everything that a rishi sees has to be a mantra, because, you know, they can have non-mantra darshanas also. Now how do you verify whether it's a mantra or not? Is that you go to another rishi and ask him whether whatever I have seen is a mantra, and only if the higher rishi or the other peer acknowledge that this is a mantra, that becomes a mantra. What is this other than peer review? Right. In fact, in one of his work he says, you know, he quotes one of the Purana Vakyas which says that the more stronger a Purvapaksha that is constructed by a Shishya, the more punya the Shishya gets. This is Bharatiya to me, right. I mean, a lot of us are teachers. Madhvacharya says it in one of the commentary of Bhagavata. I can send you the quote, right. So now a lot of us are teachers. Now tell me how many of us incentivize our students to ask questions. Now because our students don't ask questions, you know, we don't challenge status quo, we are where we are. Right? And we should ask hard questions, and we should not be shying away from hard questions, and that is what the Shastras tell us, right. In fact, Parishkaras in Shastras, you know, there are lots of these Parishkara Padhati in Shastras. What do these Parishkara Padhatis do? So Gangesha came, wrote Tattva Chintamani, right, and you had some Lakshana of Vyapti, and people next to him came and, you know, they showed some Lakshana dosha, right? There was some Ati Vyapti that was there. And Raghunath Diditi came and he did some parishkaras on top of it. Then Gadadhara Bhatta came and did some other parishkara on top of it, and so on. Then Parampara continues even today. Now this is exactly how science works. Now the problem is, whenever we talk of Bharatiya Shastras, you know, there is, for some reason, right, you know, the students or people, general public, get this notion that it is more dogma, right, than epistemology, or people think that science is very different from Shastras. You know, this is something that we need to get rid of, right. We should, to me, the modern scientific methods are exactly the same as the Shastric methods. There is absolutely no difference by that. So, when I say that Shastra studies are inevitable to everybody who is a student of science, it is in this sense that I say that the method of enquiry, the method of constructing proofs and asking questions, it is this which has to be imbibed in everybody. And now if you keep studying Shastras, there is no way that you escape this route. However, you look at it, people have been studying, going to schools and studying whatever curriculum, and we have been very successful in stopping them thinking, making them stop thinking. Now, any student of Shastra will not stop that, because it's their day-to-day routine. So, this is one direction in which I thought that you need to make people study Bharatiya Shastra. So, today we have to be, keep our curious minds alive, not aided by schools, we should keep them alive in spite of going to schools. We should be curious in spite of going to schools today, right. So, now the question is, how do we keep it alive? One way is definitely to make our children go through Bharatiya Shastra Parampara, make them study at least one of the Shastras. It can be any of the Shastras, make them study one of the Shastras, and the kind of epistemological samskara that it imbibes in students is unparalleled. It does not matter what they do as profession in their life, this studying Shastras make them start asking these kinds of questions by construction. So, this is one direction in which we should think. The other direction that I have been thinking is that today we have artificial intelligence, right. I do not know how many of you have actually used some of these language models. They are extraordinarily powerful. So much so that very recently we had this report everywhere, you might have seen that one of these language models got a medal in International Mathematics Olympiad. Now, this is a big thing, this is a huge thing, okay. Now, this means that we as human beings were always thinking that we are superior because we have intelligence. Now, that is gone. So, I keep comparing this to the industrial revolution that happened. Before industrial revolution, people who had a lot of muscular power were considered useful because they could lift objects, they could push things and do a lot of things that the others can't do. Now, come machines, so these people went out of job and nobody was giving any value to people who had muscular power. In my mind, we are having a similar moment today where we cannot claim superiority because we have intellectual power anymore, because you can have replicatable machines that can think much better than we do, and that is already happening. I just gave one example where there are machines that can solve toughest exams that the human beings have set in, which is places like International Mathematics Olympiads. Now, the question going forward will not be that of technology, right, that will keep happening, but there are other questions like, what should one do if there arises a conflict between the human and this machine? It is already happening, it will happen. So, now the question of what is the right thing to do and what should one do if there arises a conflict between human and machines, do you think you can find any respite in any of the non-Bharatiya Shastras to these questions? Because we have not even addressed and thought about it. I will tell you, see, one other question that a lot of my students and people ask me is that, if your parampara was so great and intelligent and all that, why didn't any one of you come up with things like electricity? Why was electricity not discovered and invented in India? Or why did anything, right? I mean, you take anything that is useful. Why did that it did not originate from India, right? So, either you say that at that point in time, we were as I said, we only have historical significance and we were good at that point of time and whatever invasion happened and all that. But I have a different viewpoint here. The way I think is, if you look at any of the Bharatiya Shastra Parampara, right, they talk of Chaturvida Purushartha, right, which is, all of you know this, right, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, and the Parama Purushartha, which is the Moksha, is what is sought by everyone. There is a nice saying that says that adukkham itarat sarvam jiva eva tu dukkhinah tesham dukkha prahanaya shutiresha pravartate. So basically the ultimatum of all shastras or any vidyasthanas, if you look at the Atharvana also, right, atha para yaya tad aksharam adhigamyate. So the akshara adhigama karanatva is what is the mukhya lakshana of shastra, which means that any shastra that you construct has to be constructed by keeping this thing in the mind, that it is aimed at the ultimate happiness of us human beings. Right? So this is the foundational bedrock of all shastras, and if you look at all shastra, irrespective of what shastra that you look at, the apavarga, which is the the ultimate happiness as a concept, right, has been put forward as something that is very internal, as something that does not come from something that is external, right. More so, every shastra prescribes you that you should stay away from prakriti, right, if you want to seek that ultimate happiness. Karma anubandhini manushya loke. So basically the whole idea of moksha, right, is getting rid of everything that you are not. The lakshana of moksha is said like this, muktihi hitva anyatha rupam swarupena vyavasthitihi. Very, it's orthogonally different from the Western idea of development and success, because the Western idea of development and success comes from acquisition. Earn more, right, consume more, and that's the definition of GDP, right, you produce more, consume more, right, and more you produce, more you consume, more developed you are and more successful you are. Now orthogonally opposite, and not even orthogonally, right, diametrically opposite to this lies our way of thinking, or the Bharatiya way of thinking, where they say that the more frugal a life that you do, the more you stay away from prakriti, right, the more you are closer to apavarga, because the very construction and the definition of apavarga is that the ultimate sukha that you are seeking is within, and the dukkha that you have right now is because you are attached to everything that you are not and giving away everything. So that is why the word is moksha, right, not prapana. Nobody said that the ultimate goal is prapti or mahaprapti or something. They did not say that it is mahaprapti. If you look at the other semantic religions, etc., right, it is always getting something. So you go to some place, you get this, you get that, etc. But here it is not about getting, it is about getting rid of everything. Muktihi hitva anyatha rupam swarupena vyavasthitihi. So basically the very idea of parama purushartha is that the hypothesis is the following, that look, whatever you are seeking, which is the ultimate bliss, right, is within. Now everything that is not you is something that you should get rid of. Now the whole exercise is to get rid of everything that you are not. Now if somebody has this sort of hypothesis built in, why would they indulge with nature? Why would they indulge in prakriti? Now every so-called development that has happened, right, has happened by using prakriti, or rather abusing prakriti. Right. After all, the AI revolution that is happening today, the upadana dravya is sand, everything started from sand, these are silica, right, that is prakriti. I mean, what I meant to say is that my opinion of why Bharatiya Shastra Parampara did not look at the so-called Western way of success is because our definition of success itself is very, very different. Not only different, that it is exactly opposite to the perceived notion of today's success of modern science. Now presenting this alternative hypothesis in the minds of tomorrow's leaders and children is of extreme importance, because when somebody is creating technology or somebody is contributing to today's so-called success, has to know that there exists a parallel narrative or an alternate narrative or a hypothesis of what success means. Now if one is not exposed to this thinking at all, then there is no way that, see, today we have questions, right, when there is war between people, now how do you know who is correct, who is wrong. There is, today the way the world is working is whoever is like powerful in terms of resources, we just as a community we ascribe value in something and we say that it is valuable and we just stick to those values. Now if there is no dharmic underpinning, right, shastric underpinning of what is correct and what is wrong, how do you think people who build these technologies would build it? Think all the conflicts that are happening, right, most of the conflicts that are happening today can be ascribed to this thing that people do not have this sort of grounding when they are growing up, when they are studying shastras. Now think about it, if somebody studies shastras, not only they become scientific by construction, they also become dharmic and have this alternative viewpoint for the definitions of success. But you are getting both. So now why do you think that this is not inevitable in today's world, right? So if somebody, as I said, somebody is constructing, I keep saying this, that we keep talking about the arishadvarga, right, the kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsara and all that, which is said to be something that everybody has to be disassociated with and all that. So look at what technology has done today. 50 years back, all of these had boundaries. Our lobha was only limited to 2 streets from our home or whatever that is available in the dukans or shops around our home. Now our lobha has no bounds because there is Amazon, right? Matsarya was confined to our cousins and our neighbors or Sharmaji ka beta, right, whoever is your neighbor and all that. Now Matsarya has no bounds because you have Facebook and Instagram. Now you can be having Matsarya on a person who is sitting 5,000 kilometers away, 10,000 kilometers away doing something, but you still have Matsarya on him or her. And I am sure that now you can continue the list, right? You can associate an app with all the arishadvargas that you have today. Now this is the technology that we are building. Now do you think people are happier on an average because of what has happened so far? That's a question that we should be asking ourselves. Now when we have to sell, or rather when we have to convince our next generation of why do we need to study Bharatiya Shastras, I think this is the story that we should tell them, and this is very, very, very relevant today. Right? Unless you teach them that that one has to stay away from abusing Prakriti, unless you teach them that you need to, whatever you are seeking is within and you don't have to look outside, there is no way that the next generation is going to abuse the technology that is being built today. Right? Of course these people don't know how to question because they have not studied Shastras and they went to modern schools. Of course there are always exceptions, there are people who go to achieve in spite of going to these schools, right? But on an average the society is not questioning today, it is just going behind whatever is the fad of the day is, right? Whatever the social media feeds them, they would take it up, right? Now they can't think, they can't question because they have not studied Shastras. They don't have the alternative hypothesis of Atharva, they don't know how to use these tools. Now where are they heading? I am really scared about what happens to my next generation because they neither have the so-called scientific shastric ability to question things, right, nor they have the purushartha or the apavarga hypothesis of what Shastras show them as dharma. Now think about what happens, it is already happening. When I see my next generation, I think all of you have this experience as well, most of you have this experience. Our next generation people are much more unhappier than what we were, right? I mean we grew up pretty happily. Look at what is happening to today's children, right? So now can you build a healthy society, a happy society without getting exposed to these ideas of Shastras? I don't think so. I don't think there is any other alternative. Right? And even things like the idea of nishkama karma and so on, right? It calms down one mind so much. So basically, it has come out of multiple centuries and millennium of observation that people have done, that things are not under your control. See, I mean, I keep teaching in these institutions, right? Every other day I see my students, one or the other student depressed because his or her paper got rejected, or because they got lesser CGPA, or they didn't get the next job, whatever it is. right? So now, how, as I said, right, I mean, one line, how can you create a healthy society without exposing people to Shastras? How can you create a scientific society without exposing people to Shastras? Because the kind of rigor that is there in Shastras, the Parishkara Lakshana and so on. So I think it is sort of two in one, right? If somebody studies Shastras, not only that they inherently become scientific, but they also have this other grounding, that when they go out to do whatever they do, see, all of us have conflicts in life, right? What is right, what is wrong. Tasmat shastram pramanante karyakara vyavasthito, right? Whenever, and also the Taittiriya Upanishad says, right? Yadite karma vichikitsa va vritta vichikitsa va syat. We did good science sometime. That's enough. I mean, of course, people who study that shall study that out of their interest. But what is to be actually taught is this attitude of thinking, this attitude of epistemological ways, right? See, people can't have logical conversations these days, because they don't know what jatis are. So they don't know what nigrahasthanas are. There are logical fallacies in everything that people say today because they have not been taught Shastras. I mean, I keep telling in a joking way that even family conflicts can be resolved. If there is an argument between husband and wife, if both of them have studied good Shastras, the arguments become much clearer. I mean, all of my friends who have studied Shastras would understand that most of the times it happens because there is no logic to the argument that is there, right? So, I mean, I am teaching Shastras to my 10-year-old daughter now because I think that it is inevitable. Otherwise, there is no way that I am having a logical conversation with her because your schools don't teach that, right? So, yata duktva aham viramami. While I don't see a lot of merit in saying that, or rather trying to force fit today's science in Shastras. In fact, I think that idea would backfire. I would say that Shastras have enormous amount of value, right, that would not come from any other source in developing the so-called scientific mindset, epistemological methods, and also especially for people who are in technology and science. So they have to confront a lot of conflicts when they are constructing technology and taking decisions, and Shastra is the only way that could help them resolve these conflicts, is my opinion. So, having said that, I would thank Atharva Forum for giving me an opportunity to put forth these ideas in front of this esteemed audience. Things I keep saying that, right? Bubukshitam na pratibhati kinchit. Bhojana anantaramapi na pratibhati kinchit. Because it's nidra kala, right? I mean, this is the so if you want to sort of, have a talk which is not very important, keep it right after lunch, right? So that way, I think it's fine. I think I wanted to just share some of my thoughts with this esteemed audience, and I'm very thankful. Atharva Forum ityasya kartagyam samarpya वाग्व्यापाराद् विरमामि। नमः सर्वेभ्यः।
एकः प्रश्नः आसीत् यत् भवता उक्तं यत् अस्माकं शास्त्रेषु एतदेतत् आसीत् सर्वं विज्ञानम् इति इदानीं न वक्तव्यं, परन्तु किमर्थं न, यतोहि अनेन ज्ञानेन गौरववर्धनमपि भवति। यत् अस्माकं शास्त्रेषु एतदेतत् आसीत् इत्यपि ज्ञानं नास्ति, छात्रेषु तु एतदपि ज्ञानं नास्ति यत् वेदाः कति सन्ति, परन्तु तत् यथा भवता उक्तं तत् सर्वं समीचीनं, सत्यमेव, परन्तु तस्यापि प्रकटनम् आवश्यकम् अस्ति इति अहं मन्ये।
सत्यं यदुक्तं भवता तत् सत्यमेव, किन्तु तदेव मुख्यं न स्यादित्येव। एकदा वक्तव्यं सर्वम् आसीत्, अस्मासुपि सर्वम् आसीत् इति। गौरववर्धनस्य अल्पं प्रयोजनमिति मे मतिः। कर्तव्यम् एकदा तु कर्तव्यमेव, न कर्तव्यमिति न वदामि, कर्तव्यम् एकदा कर्तव्यं, किन्तु तदेव क्रियते चेत् सर्वदा तर्हि प्रश्नाः भवन्ति। यदि सर्वम् अस्ति चेत् तत्र एव पर्यवसानं न स्यादित्येव मम अभिप्रायः।
तत् समीचीनं।
यदि भवता उच्यते तत् सर्वम् अस्माकं शास्त्रेषु वर्तते तर्हि प्रश्नाः भवन्ति खलु, कुतो एलेक्ट्रिसिटी कुतो नास्ति इति, तस्य प्रश्नस्य उत्तरमपि नास्ति अस्मासु।
उत्तरमस्ति,
किमिति?
यथा भवता उक्तं राजा एव कालस्य कारणं, राजा परिवर्तितः, कालः परिवर्तितः, तदानीं सर्वं नष्टं जातं,
तर्हि
बुभुक्षितः
एवं। तर्हि
राष्ट्रः किं करोति?
इदानीन्तनेषु कालेषु शास्त्रस्य किमपि प्रयोजनं न स्यात् इत्येव भवति खलु?
न नास्ति, तथा नास्ति।
आसीत् एकदा, इदानीं तु नास्ति इति वक्तव्यं वा?
न एवं कः वदति? परन्तु आरम्भः रुचिकरविषयेषु आरम्भात् भवेत्, यत् एतदेतदेतद् आसीत् अपरं च इत्यपि अस्ति। अनेन यत् समस्यानां निराकरणं
नैव
आगामी समस्यानां निराकरणमपि शास्त्रेषु अस्ति।
प्रक्रिया वर्तते इत्येव उच्यते मया। सैन्टिफिक् प्रक्रिया, शास्त्रप्रक्रिया इति या वर्तते तस्मिन्नेव विषये बहु वर्तन्ते वक्तव्यम् इति। तत्र पर्यवसानं न स्यात् इत्येव मम अभिप्रायः। न वक्तव्यम् इत्येव न वक्तव्यम्।
अपि च भवता उक्तं यत् शास्त्राणि अधीतव्यानि, शास्त्राणि तु बहूनि सन्ति।
एवं
छात्रेभ्यः किं किं पाठनीयम्?
एकस्मिन् जन्मनि एकं शास्त्रं, किमपि शास्त्रं, कस्यापि शास्त्रस्य अध्ययनं स्यात्, एकं शास्त्रं स्यात्, व्याकरणं शास्त्रं। किं भवति इदानीम् इत्युक्ते यः कोऽपि शास्त्रं नाधीते, केवलम् अस्माकं शास्त्रग्रन्थेषु एवमासीत् इत्येव ज्ञानं वर्तते। तैः उक्तरीत्या केनापि शास्त्रं कुलङ्कुशेन न यः कोऽपि न अधीते शास्त्रं। किमर्थमिति मया तु उच्यते तत्र पर्यवसानं न स्यात्। अस्माकं शास्त्रेषु सर्वम् आसीदिति ज्ञानेन पर्यवसितर्न स्यात्, किन्तु शास्त्र अध्ययनम् आवश्यकम्। एकस्य शास्त्रस्य आमूलाग्रम् अध्ययनम् आवश्यकम्। 10 वर्षेभ्यः 12 वर्षेभ्यः परं शास्त्राध्ययनं सर्वैरपि कार्यम् इत्येव मम अभिप्रायः। न वक्तव्यम् इति न, तत्र उत्साहवर्धनादिकं तु भविष्यत्येव। तदर्थं जनाः अपि सन्ति। अस्मादृशैस्तु तत्तु कार्यं न कार्यं, किन्तु विद्यार्थिनां कृते शास्त्र अध्यापनं कर्तव्यम् इत्येव मम अभिप्रायः।
बहुधा अयं विषयः मया निवेदितः। बहुधा अयं विषयः निवेदितः। प्रायशः समस्याः भवन्ति। भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा केन्द्रतः अथवा संस्थापक्षतः अस्माभिः समस्यायाः निराकरणमपि क्रियते, परन्तु चिन्तयन्तु वयं तु टॉप टू बॉटम पर्यन्तं गच्छामः। वयम् इदानीं समस्या का अस्ति? इदानीं वयम् उच्चशिक्षाक्षेत्रे कार्यं कुर्मः।
कस्मिन् शास्त्रे?
सर्वेषु विषयेषु। इदानीं भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरायामपि यः छात्रः 20 वर्षेभ्यः यावत् सर्वम् अधीत्य तस्य मनसि या प्रगाढता जाता, तस्याः प्रगाढतायाः निराकरणम् इदानीं वयसि काले कर्तव्यम् इति काचित् समस्या। अस्माभिः प्राथमिके अध्ययने स्तरे कश्चन प्रयासः न क्रियते। इदानीमपि पश्यन्तु, यदि आसीत् इति ज्ञानम् अस्माभिः किमर्थं देयं? यतोहि प्राक्तनं ज्ञानं तस्मिन् पार्श्वे वर्तते इति। प्राक्तनं ज्ञानमेव, आदिमं ज्ञानमेव इदमेव स्यात्। एतदर्थम् अस्माभिः कुत्रापि किमपि न क्रियते। समस्यायाः मूलं तु इदमेव। अप टू 12th पर्यन्तं छात्राः यद् पठन्ति तावत् पर्यन्तं तस्य मनसि या स्थितिः, इदानीं साक्षात् शास्त्रीस्तरे भवन्तः ज्ञापयन्ति यदेवं, तर्हि एतावत् पर्यन्तं यद् अधीतं तद् व्यर्थम् आसीत्, उतवा वयम् इदानीं यत् पठिष्यामः तद् व्यर्थम् अस्ति इति काचित् दोलायमाना स्थितिः वर्तते। अतः इदानीं वयम् उच्चशिक्षातः माध्यमिकपर्यन्तं गच्छामः, परन्तु प्रायशः शिक्षायाम् आदिमं कर्तव्यम् अस्माकं कथञ्चित् समस्यायाः निराकरणे। समानान्तरधारायाम् अस्माभिः कानिचन पुस्तकानि कर्तव्यानि इति कश्चन एकः पक्षः, उतवा अयं प्रयासः क्रियते वा अनेन केन्द्रेण, उतवा कर्तव्यं वा, उतवा समस्यायाः निराकरणं किं भवितुमर्हति वा इत्येव।
कर्तव्यं तु कर्तव्यम् इत्यत्र संशयलेशोऽपि नास्ति।
परन्तु अस्माभिः या सरणिः अनुसृयते सा सरणिः समीचीना वा? उच्चशिक्षायां कश्चन छात्रः भवद्भिः प्रथमम् उदाहरणं दत्तं न? एकः कश्चन छात्रः सङ्गणकविज्ञाने उपाधिं गृहीतवान्। उपाधिप्राप्त्यनन्तरं पुनः ज्ञानपरं प्रायशः इति मानसिकी भावना, प्रायशः ये वैज्ञानिकाः अथवा विशेषज्ञाः भवन्ति जिज्ञासया भारतीय ज्ञाने प्रवृत्ताः, अध्ययनाय प्रवृत्ताः न्यूनाः एव। अध्ययनप्रवृत्तिकाले तेषां प्रवृत्तिः भिन्ना आसीत्। इदानीं समस्या का अस्ति? वयम् उच्चशिक्षाक्षेत्रे कुर्मः।
मया तु एवं चिन्त्यते, सर्वेषु भारतीयशास्त्रेषु एका शास्त्रीया रीतिरिति वर्तते खलु। शास्त्रं किमपि स्यात्, व्याकरणं वा स्यात्, न्यायशास्त्रं वा स्यात्, वेदान्तादिकं वा स्यात्, एका अनुस्यूता रीतिर्वर्तते। का सा रीतिः? तत्र प्रमाणत्रयम् इति, दि आर्ट् आफ् थिङ्किङ्ग्। सी व्युत्पत्तिरिति उच्यते खलु शास्त्रेषु। सो बेसिकली डोंट टीच पीपल, राइट? यू टीच चिल्ड्रन द वे ऑफ थिंकिंग. One of my teachers used to say always, that a good teacher is one who becomes redundant after some time. Such a profound statement, right? Say if you are a good teacher, then you should get, I mean, you should be redundant after some time. I mean, your use should just cease to exist. Now, what I say is, what is to be done is, you teach them the Shastra Padhati, you teach them the way to think. See, if you look at the way the Western schools work, they call this, they give a name for this, they call this the conceptual learning. And all their curriculum is based out of conceptual learning. Now, that is what is missing in my opinion in our schools, and there are some specialized schools that are accessible only to some section of society, where international schools and so on, where this conceptual teaching is done. To me, that is the Shastriya Padhati. Now, what I propose is the following, that also tell them that this has been in our Shastras, and teach them the Shastric words also, tell them that this is the way to think, this is, make them have the Shastriya Vyutpatti. See, I'll give you an example of myself, right? When I studied, I went to schools and I also went to Gurukuls. When I was doing it, I did not see these things as two different things. Of course, Vishayaha bhinnaha eva, kintu paddhatihi ya vartate, jnana janana paddhatihi sa tu eka eva. In fact, one complements the other very nicely. In fact, I'll make another statement. All our Shastric Vidwansas that are there have to be taught mathematics and computer science, in my opinion. Otherwise, they will become redundant. Okay, rigorously. See, not that you know how to use computer, right? You know the nuances of programming, for instance, right? You know how operating system works. You know what object-oriented programming is, and so on. Now, the same thing has to happen to a computer scientist, that they know how. What is Vyapti Lakshana, for instance, right? How do you do Parishkaras? How do you build epistemological graphs? How do you think epistemologically in the right way? I think today, studying like Shastra in the traditional way has to be changed. That is what the professor was saying in the morning also, that you need to change the way the Shastras are also studied, and you need to change the way the modern curriculum also is studied. Right? That is what I am coming from. That is where I am coming from. That the Shastra Padhati, right, or the Vyutpatti that I say, has to be imbibed in the curriculum. That's all.
I had a somewhat different kind of question, because you didn't put it in so many words, but here the ultimate this thing is not for material acquisitions and you become more and more prosperous and all that, but
it is one of the directions to
and,
think about
in inner kind of these things, that is true. But and this may be even very good for individuals. But what will happen to societies? No society, for instance, India has faced lot of problems in the past 1,000 years or whatever it is. Because people will not let you be. People will not let you be. That some others will come and try to oppose you, destroy you, and things like that. So then you have to deal with it. And you can't be satisfied with inner life and inner goals and things like that. How is it possible to face the external world with this kind of?
Okay. I may be too young to answer this, but yeah, I'll try. Yeah, I have thought through it, right? See, when I say that it is the apavarga and the internal thing and all that, it's not quite that it is always an individual centric thing, right? There are societal dharmas. It is not that you only look at the individual at individual level. The questions that one should be asking at this point of time is achieving a certain level of GDP the only metric of success? Do we have an alternative? Do we have an alternative to the current construct of what success is and what prosperity is? That's all. If you look at Bharatiya Shastras, there is a completely different narrative that is given on what prosperity is all about. No? Now, can we construct a self-sustaining society around those lines is the question. I am just posing questions, I do not have answers at this moment of time. But right now, we take a lot of pride in saying that we are the third largest economy. Do we really have to take pride in that is my question. Right? And you know what? The possibility of even asking and looking at alternative directions can only come from Shastras, Bharatiya Shastras. because there is no other alternative anywhere. And people have thought through these questions and they have asked these questions, right? I mean, how to construct alternative parallel societies to the current narrative that one has. What if nobody has an exposure to this? We are losing on a lot of things, right?
You see, we have already discussed a lot of things about the theoretical part of it. Theoretical part I am saying in that sense, because we are saying that we must study at least one grantha.
One shastra, not
One
one
shastra
grantha, yeah.
One grantha will also do the same.
Shatashlokena panditaha, as they say, no? Yeah.
Okay. So practically, whatever we are looking the scenario, and no doubt the person sitting here, they have to implement it. Okay, so how to implement it? That's a question basically.
Agreed. I have a well thought out of plan there. I'll give you, I'll tell you what can be perhaps done. See, in modern day schooling, right? I mean, you know that a good idea should be institutionalized to scale it. So we have to institutionalize this. Now, how do we do this is the question. If you look at the so-called modern pedagogical curriculum that you have in the primary education, I think that lot of it that is being taught in today's classrooms are useless. I mean, it's my personal opinion, and maybe lot of you have this sort of an experience perhaps, right? And you can customize that. Niyoga bhedat prayoga bhedaha, right? I mean, like if you have a different student, you can actually customize that. One big mistake that we are doing today is that having a classroom of 60 people and one teacher standing there and delivering lectures, that is the worst way of interacting and transferring knowledge. You have to first make it. How many gurukulas used to be there? Every household used to be a gurukula, right? You decentralize the idea, and you can cut down a lot of fluff that is out there in our curriculum and fill it with stuff that is useful. That is one way to do it. Now, NIOS gives you a lot of flexibility in doing it. There are other practical considerations for it, but there is a possibility that one can do it, right? That, see, I will tell you, making people study good mathematics, 1 or 2 languages and 1 shastra is very much possible. Cut down all their social media time, right? So, don't let them use their phones. Do you think it is difficult? It is not difficult. See, people used to study simultaneously 4 shastras, 5 shastras, right? Chatushastra Panditas and all that. Do you think it would be difficult to study 2 shastras? Let us say one is a computer scientist and one studies Nyaya-shastra, very much possible. The only thing is, as I said, right, too much of fluff in current day curriculum, right? Today's curriculum that we have that we implement in these modern day schools, there's too many things that are not needed, in my opinion, and that can be experimented with. And I have sort of created a 12-year curriculum so as to how to do this, but as I said, now I am too small an individual to implement that, but that is possible in my opinion.
Namaste sir, your talk has covered a lot of issues and a great number of concerns. So I don't know where to pick up and what to discuss, because each of them will take quite a bit of discussion. But I will focus on 1 or 2 issues which have come out of what you have said. So you have made 2 criticisms. One is recounting of our past achievements. They are past. And why do we recount them? One reason he said that we should
Be proud
have
of
pride in our culture.
No, yeah, definitely.
And the other reason is at that time we were ahead, whatever. Okay. Other thing you have said is many things we did, they had germs of what is going on today. That's also not very relevant according to you. About your second point, I think I have no issue at all. In fact, most of our talk today is to justify what is going on now, not necessarily in India, but all over the world, what we think is a great advance. We just say this is what we had also thought of long time ago. That's most of the time just an apologetic way of saying we should be doing what they are doing. So it's because we were not doing it then, because in the year of our Lord 2024, somebody is going to do something. So we were doing it for. But now there are 2, 3 other questions. When we are talking about the past, in fact, India has been accused of not having historical sense, as you know. So we hardly talked about our past repeatedly. But I think what we did talk about repeatedly was how and why we did whatever we did. It's not just what we did which is important, it is how and why what we did which is important.
I mean, complete agreement. That's what I call as the Shastra Padhati.
No, that's what. So
Yeah.
that's where we are coming.
Yeah.
But that's where I think there is a great distinction between how and why what is being done in the name of science today, and how and why what we did in the name of various shastras earlier. You seem to sort of imply that in terms of methodology, what we did is similar to what is done rigorously in modern science. If by rigor you mean that they had an accepted set of pramanas and they followed them systematically and argued between their relative weightage and all that and arrived at conclusion. And for that they had some framework. So we also had a framework. But that in itself does not mean that how we did it or why we did it is similar to what is going on in modern science. But one simple example which we can see in history is why something is being done in science, which you have also ultimately come down to, the kind of purushartha that they had is not the kind of purushartha that we had. And therefore what we would have done in science would have been systematically very different. What we would be looking for in technology will be systematically very different. What we will be looking for in education, in politics, in culture would be systematically very different because our priorities of purusharthas are different from the priorities of purusharthas elsewhere. And especially in modern science at its origin, most people have found out that since for about 1,000 years Europe lived in a rather poor condition because they had very little of what we today call as science. They got into a feeling that this way of trying and observing nature and in that trying to control nature will be the objective of all knowledge. Gaining power over nature is the objective of all knowledge. And similarly,
That's
gaining
fair,
power
I mean.
over humans, power over other humans is the source of, is the reason for all social knowledge.
So that's
this
fair,
kind
right?
of,
I
this
mean,
is at the
yeah.
basis of their scientific
Sure.
knowledge. This is at the basis of, so the why part of it.
Sure.
Now the how part of it is also very different. The understanding of nature and the way to interact with it has been very different. I'll give you a quotation from a Japanese historian of mathematics. So he said, we in Japan started looking at modern Western science from the what is called the Edo period, 19th century. And we sort of transplanted most of that. But as you know, this modern science that we transplanted has come up with its own understanding of, their understanding of nature and how to interact with it, and their understanding of nature, understanding of humans and the purposes. And see, we know from our earlier history that this was not so. We were following most of our knowledge was derived from the Chinese and the Indian knowledge. And we also know that the science of future, the science of day after tomorrow, the science of next century, or science of next decade, may be very different and may include many of our ideas about nature and our purposes. And so unless we know what we did, so we are going to study all this. We are going to study Chinese science, Indian science, because this is not the Shashvata science. The today's science of modern, the route by which it has arrived, is not the science of the next, for the rest of the creation. So for that we need to know. Now I see in some very fundamental contradictions between the way, say, modern science has developed and the way we had thought about in astronomy, in mechanics, in Ayurveda, etc. So those differences are actually fundamental and they have governed the knowledge. Just one more minute, I'll complete. One of the main things that Western modern science has repeatedly done is, they say that at this time whatever discovered is the most optimal approach to reality and the best truth. And about 200 years ago they were saying this is absolute reality and this is the truth. For about 400 years, from about 1500 to 1900, they kept saying that we know the truth, the absolute, we have found the absolute laws that God had made while creating this universe. That's what Newton said, that's what Laplace said, that's what everybody around that time said. So they also talk of laws which world has to obey. It's a very metaphysical idea. Why world has to obey any laws? No Indian would have ever thought that the world has to obey some laws. And then they thought that this is the law that according to which God has created. Assuming that also, why humans should have access to the laws by which God has created? Because their theology said that humans are in the image of God. So the Kepler said that we can understand it the way God has created the world because we are created in the image of God. So this is extraordinary amount of theology by which they claim absolute truth to whatever they discovered, however powerful it might have been. This idea is totally alien to the way we have thought about the world. We have repeatedly thought about the world as a small, that we are a small part of the world. And the purpose of knowledge is to have this understanding of nature to the extent that we can live well with it. And our greatness is not our rationality. Our greatness is our viveka, which can make us discriminate between what is dharma and what is adharma. And so these are the kind of ideas which have governed our knowledge. And these are the kind, so whenever Nilakanta Somyaji is talking about astronomical model, he is not saying I am teaching you the, he is saying even Aryabhatta did not teach the true planetary model to his students. Aryabhatta separated all those parameters which have to be determined by observation in a separate thing, and his principles of calculation in a separate part in his book. That is because the first part anyway, it was clear to him, was changeable, fully changeable. And even in the second part, he gave emphasis to what is called pariksha. So when you teach any astronomy to anybody, he said we have to teach them how to do pariksha of what we teach. We don't teach him saying that this is the ultimate truth. Maybe in Vedanta or theology, we may say something about this is what has been revealed to us as the ultimate truth of universe, which is different from saying this is the ultimate truth of this table or of this phone or of our laws of the world. So we don't teach any science to anybody as the ultimate truth. We teach them something saying this is what is working, but you should do pariksha, not experiment. You should do pariksha and arrive at the appropriate way of going on. And this I think this is said in 1500, which is diametrically opposite to what you will read in Newton or Pascal or Bacon or all those great philosophers of science.
No, I think there was no question there. It was a very nice 5-minute summary of what I wanted to say. So I am in complete agreement with it. But one little point. See, when I say that that the methodology of the Western way is similar to what has been there in Shastras, I only talk of the epistemological methodology, right? I mean, you look at the Galileo model of science, right? What is a scientific methodology? You start with observation, then you do, then there is a hypothesis, then you experiment and infer and keep going in this loop, right? The same thing, right? You do a pratigna and then you have the sadhya, then hetu, and then you have upanaya, nigama, etc. These epistemological methods is what I say are similar, right? I mean, there is no dogma. What I mean to say is that there is nothing where you just say that, exactly what you said. There is no authority in whatever you say. I mean, we teach viveka and pariksha, which has a lot of parallels to what the scientific methodology is all about. I'm in complete agreement with what you said. I said there is no vipratipatti here.
That scientific methodology you are referring to is the methodology of the last 50-100 years. For most of modern science is not the science of last 50-100 years. The origin of most of the weapons that we use, the origin of most of the methodologies that we use are in the sciences which were developed from 1600 to 1900.
Agreed. So theologically,
this idea that this could change, and this can change, and this can change. And even then they say this is the best that you can have for today.
Yeah.
As if today they have the best claim to be having the best approximation to reality.
Yeah.
There is no reason
correct.
Why anybody should be having that feeling. So that's inherent in the construction of
I agree, completely agree. Yeah, I think they are bitten by Bharatiyata now, I suppose. Right? They are changing slowly.
Especially in mathematics, they are still not bitten by Bharatiyata. In spite of all the proofs that they have obtained, that the absolute truth of mathematics cannot be proved, they still say mathematics is a collection of theorems and whose proof is
In spite of Gödel. In spite of Gödel, right?
Yeah, no, in spite of anything, not just, all discussion that there can be nothing absolutely true about mathematics, which involves
Very
thinking
interestingly,
itself.
right, just to corroborate what you are saying, there are things like Naisha Tarkena Matirapaneya, right, which is very in spirit similar to what Gödel came up with, but yeah, correct.
Whatever you said has come full circle. So for a long time, Indians were criticized for being passive, apathetic, precisely because of their scriptures and precisely because of all these texts which promoted an inward-looking perspective, and because of which you are not making advances in science. And today you have essentially said that we cannot make advances in science if we are going to use those scriptures as values, because as you said, they are worse than orthogonal, they are diametrically opposite. So, don't you see this as a contradiction at the AICTE?
It is a contradiction that is at a personal level as well. See, I have difficulty in using this phone, honestly, because I don't know how can I very meticulously use this in my day-to-day life and think of a structure to my life, okay, which excludes this. That's a serious question. I have that contradiction not at organizational levels. I have it at my personal level. See, I see it everywhere. Now, how can you talk of moksha and staying away from Prakriti while pursuing technology and gadgets? I don't know. See, there are people who would say that no, we would use this for whatever, right? I'll do this thing, all that. I don't know, that's too fragile an explanation to give, right? So now we are, all said and done, we are beneficiaries of modern science. Otherwise we'll be lying to ourselves, right? So now, being beneficiaries of modern science, using everything, now how do we argue against it? How do we place the Bharatiya Shastra, Apavarga and the Purushartha ideas in today's context is a question that serious academics have to ask and answer. To me, at an individual level, it is still a question. That is why I say, at some level it looks like, just saying that we had this, we had that, it's not serious enough. I think we have to ask these serious questions and take them head on. As you rightly said, why are we using AI, why are we using technology and talking against it? That is contradiction. That is what I said as Swakriya, Swanya, Virodha-s. How do we see, if you at least the stories of our our ancestors and these people, more often than not you hear this thing that they left everything, right, and lived independently of all this, whatever the comforts that they had in their time. So now you cannot have the cake and eat it too. You cannot pursue this and talk about it. It is what the original texts in Vedanta say. But are we truthful to ourselves? That becomes a very subjective question. Starting from an individualistic level to the level of society. See, again, that contradiction that you pointed out, right? It's very precise. That exists in our society also, right? See, wearing some type of clothing, or rather, celebrating some festivals don't make us Bharatiya. It's okay. It's a good starting point. You need to do that. You need to wear this, that, etc. Fine. But these are the real questions. I gave you another example, right? Is economic success the only success? That is what the West has taught us. He gave a very nice summary of why that happened, right? Europe stayed in poverty for a long time and they wanted to interact with the nature that way, and for them, produce more, consume more is the way they define their success. Do we have an alternative? No, we still talk of being Bharatiyas and we are in that race, isn't it? We still want to be at the top of the economic list, isn't it? Isn't that a contradiction? Or we should outright say that, look, guys, we were wrong. Fine, we will play the race. See, I think, in fact, it's a very, very important point that you brought in, because it is this contradiction that has actually hindering a lot of things within us as individuals, right? We don't go all out in doing whatever we do because we are at contradiction at our. We don't know, right, whether what we are doing is what we should be doing. At some level, at all of our minds, we have this contradiction that whatever I am doing, at least that I can vouch for myself, my heart keeps asking this question to myself, why am I doing AI? I write papers, I publish, I do all this. Now, why am I doing this is a question that I don't have an honest answer for. So, I think that's very true. I think we need to ask this question, where do we place the Bharatiyata in today's world? And this question has to be asked time and again, as new things come up. These questions are never asked. I think that is where it's more important that people who understand contemporary world and Bharatiya Shastras have to be grown, so that intellectuals will start asking these questions. These questions are never asked. And I am so happy that you brought that up. Thank you.
Good evening, I am Dr. Usha Singh. You made very valid points about Shastras and education in school and with teachers. The thing is that the way you talk and the way you allude to Shastras and Gyan Parampara lacks practicality, in the sense that when you go to school there are 60 students, and I personally interact with those students, and a lot of them are really not interested in their studying. Second thing is the teachers who are coming into school to teach, they are coming there in dire situations. They are qualifying 10 unnecessary government exams that they have to pass, even if they have to work in private colleges or private schools. So, despite fighting through the system, fighting through all these entrance exams for getting a 10,000 job, how do you expect to implement this thing into the system and school education? And my second is, have you ever visited a private school? Or have you interacted with the employees working in private school? How do they function? It's very easy to, talk about Shastras and everything. And secondly, economic success is not everything, but it determines a lot of things. Without a good economy, without money, without commerce running, things are not happening, not even this building. So how do you suggest to make changes?
Okay.
So the teachers, when they are employed, they are not frustrated and they somehow they have this thinking that we have to make a change. And they, at this point, a lot of teachers in school really don't care कि बच्चे कहाँ जा रहे हैं. And they have a point and they are very fair in this thing.
Okay, so most of it was rhetorical. Anyway, so I'll try. No, it's okay, no problem. Yeah, it's we have to debate. So, so you asked 3 questions. Have I visited a private school? I am a part of a school where we are running some of these things that I implemented. This is not a talk all on the air. There is in Bangalore we have this samstha called Purna Pramati, which I am a part of, and there are about 800 plus students where we are implementing some of these things that I just said. It is not simply out of thin air. Anyway, so okay, so you also said that economy is very important. Of course, arthamulah kriya sarvaha, right? I mean, we are not downplaying economy at all. Okay, we are simply asking questions where we say that is producing extremely more than what is needed. Is that what we should be doing? That's all. Is there an alternative economic model is the question that I am saying. I am definitely not downplaying economics, because as I said, right, our Shastras have taught that arthamulah kriya sarvaha, and it is one of the purusharthas that has to be very, very well pursued, right. So, I mean, we are never downplaying artha. Okay. The first question that you said, where we have to empathize towards teachers, right, and it's very difficult. I completely agree with you on that as well, but unfortunately I am a person who has been trained to study some Shastras and do technology. I am not a policy maker. All the questions that you said are very true. So, आप दिल्ली में बैठ रहे हैं, I think there are other better people to ask that question, and I completely agree with you. One thing that we have tried out, right, where you said it's very easy to talk, can't do, when we have tried out is the following, where we have small groups. So, we don't make children sit in a classroom. Are you aware of this thing called Montessori methodology? You are definitely aware of it, right? Why don't you scale this? This basically it's the Gurukula way of looking at things. Now, what happens is 4 to 5 students get associated with a guru or a teacher. Okay, they spend time, and every student, in and out, this teacher knows about them. So, it is not that I told you, right, while talking, that this way of making 70 students sit in a class and teacher giving a lecture is not the way to do it at all. Okay, I completely agree with you on that. And on the matter that these teachers are sort of frustrated and all that, I agree. Unfortunately, we live in a society where teaching has become a profession of people who cannot survive otherwise. I mean, that's a societal issue. I think teachers have to be incentivized very, very well. Okay. So now there's a very simple thing to do. As I said, it's not a, I mean, like I am not a policy, I mean, I cannot talk, I cannot decide policies. One simple thing you can do, right, in private schools, just pay your teachers well. You just need intent. I mean, you just attract good talent, right? If you want to attract good talent, you just pay your teachers pretty well. And that is one thing that you can do. You can recruit more teachers, attract more teachers. Whatever I am saying does not happen overnight, right? I mean, we keep doing that manana and tapasya, and maybe someday these thoughts will take some shape and something will happen. It's all in, you know, the good faith that we are saying that this has to happen, and all teachers have to go home very happily, right? Not frustrated that, you know, they are being paid so pathetically. And I actually completely understand what you are saying, because I am a part of this pedagogical effort that we are conducting. And yeah, so it's all in good faith. We have to do it. There is no other way. At least you can start with this very, very practical suggestion, right? Most of us are grahasthas and we have our children, right? Why can't we make our children study shastras? That we can do, no? Forget about schools. Let them do whatever they want. At least our children, we can make them study shastras. That is something that we can definitely do, no? Make them have this, you know, this appetite to shastras. Trust me, being a student of this for about a couple of decades now, it's very, very interesting. Forget about everything else, you know, all of us here know that these things that we pursue, they are extremely interesting, much more interesting than some English novel here and, you know, something there. Again, I am not downplaying anything, but it's intellectually very, very rewarding. Now, we can make our children go through that path, no? It's very, very practical. But yeah, I agree with most of your points, and we need to do something as a community. As I said, we do something at our level. Whatever we can do, we will do. That's all.
So very interesting discussion brought by you and also the other panel members. So I have two questions for you. Well, like one is a follow up on your discussion, and one is on the discussion that we have among us. So the first thing is that Shastra is important, right? And it forms the basis of our Indian understanding, Indian knowledge system, what we can say. But the thing is, we have to do something to popularize it. Now you're saying Shastra can be propagated as a way to like there is rigor, right? And you need rigor in mathematics. So, and thereby you need to understand.
And rigor is transferable.
Rigor is transferable. Correct. But now what I see teaching at the primary institute at IIT Delhi, right? Even our own students are running away from rigor, right? So we understand, so I teach AIML, right? In the first lecture I have 600 students. The moment we start teaching core maths, the number drops significantly, right? So there is a serious degradation happening, right, among the students to pursue rigor, to pursue seriousness. How we handle it? That is one thing. That is a question. Next thing is that was quite like interesting. The thing somehow I do not completely agree that our ancestors only pursuit was to have the moksha in absolute form. What you were suggesting of the renunciation. If that was the case, then our overall thing would not have been that developed. You look at our music system. We have very well defined thing, right? The sculpture, the buildings, the food. So all these developments are not possible if we will only be completely inward centric, right? So the counter to what I understand is that, of course, the thing is, it was, of course, moksha was the ultimate aim that everyone wanted to have. But the defined understanding was that it should have a proper balance, that the Vasudeva Kutumbakam, right? And under that, like satisfying that, right? Whatever you can achieve, while achieving something, you have to have this sense. Ki, this world is not only meant for you. What Westerns forgot, right? Ki, their only objective is to exploit, right? The Eastern philosophy was more on a side that you have to have a proper balance, right? So we have treated even animals at the same level as we treat humans, right? So I think that was the foundation of our development, not completely the moksha part, right? So the moment we put the moksha part completely, we somehow say that everything is redundant, right? but the moment you say you need to have a balance while you develop something, while you create something, you need to have a balance, then I think all the things would be justified. Economy will be justified. Also, before Britishers came, our contribution to GDP of the world was around 25%. So we cannot also say that we were not rich. We were very prosperous.